Hello everyone, this is Ariadne Rainbird and I'm going to be talking now about Rhiannon, a character in Welsh literature who is often considered to be a goddess, and particularly a goddess connected with horses. Rhiannon is a character who appears in medieval Welsh myth with the first branch of the Mabinogi, Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed, introducing her as an otherworldly woman riding a white horse. Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed, after his sojourn in Annwfn, the Welsh otherworld, for a year, when he swapped places with Arawn, king of Annwfn, goes up to the top of Gorsedd Arbeth, a legendary mound which some identify with Castle Narbeth in Pembrokeshire. Legend had it that those who stood on this hill, especially if they be a prince or a king, would either experience a great wonder or receive terrible blows. Pwyll said that he was not afraid of blows, but he had loved to experience a great wonder. So he took a group of his men up to the top of the hill. When there at the top, he saw below a lady dressed in silk brocade, riding a pale white horse, and his heart was full of wonder. He wished to know who this lady was, and so sent one of his men after her. But try as he might, Pwyll's man could not catch up with her, though he ran as fast as he could, whereas the lady on the horse just continued to trot along at a slow, steady pace. Eventually, the man gave up and returned exhausted to Pwyll, saying that it was impossible to catch up with her on foot. He returned to the court to fetch a horse and chased after her again, but although he pushed his horse on, he could still not catch up with her, however hard he pushed the horse. Yet the lady on the white horse continued to move at a slow, steady pace. Pwyll decided to come back the next day, this time bringing the fastest horse in the court and hoping to see the lady again. Sure enough, she appeared again on her white horse, moving at a slow, steady pace. Pwyll sent one of his men on the fastest horse, but still he could not catch up with her. Again, however hard he pushed the horse, the lady was still out of reach. Still not deterred, Pwyll decided to go back up the hill with his retinue the following day, this time taking his own horse. The lady appeared again, and Pwyll jumped on his horse and chased after her, as fast as he could. However, no matter how hard he spurred his horse on, she remained out of reach, though her horse still appeared to be moving at the same slow, steady pace. Eventually, in exasperation, Pwyll called out, "Lady, please stop!" And she stopped, saying that she would gladly wait and that it would have been better for both him and his horse if he had simply addressed her in the first place rather than chasing after her. She then explained that she was Rhiannon, daughter of Hyfaidd Hen, and that her father was giving her in marriage to someone against her will. She explained that her purpose in coming to Arbeth was to see Pwyll, as he was the man she loves, and that she would go to no other unless he rejected her. Pwyll thought that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and so he agreed to marry her. He does not question how she could be in love with him when they have never met before, and it's interesting that the description of her dress, the gold silk brocade, is also how Arawn's wife is dressed during his sojourn in the otherworld, leading some to hypothesise that Rhiannon and Arawn's wife, who is never named, are the same person, just different aspects of an otherworldly queen. Rhiannon and Pwyll arranged to meet a year later at Rhiannon's father's court, where their wedding feast would be laid out for them. Pwyll kept his promise and attended the court, and the feast began with Pwyll seated behind Rhiannon. Whilst they're feasting, however, a stranger approached and asked for a boon to be granted. Pwyll, in his happiness and joy, said that he would grant the stranger anything that was in his power to give, though Rhiannon tried to warn him not to do anything rash. The man then revealed himself as Gwawl, the man Rhiannon had been betrothed to, and he demanded that Pwyll give him Rhiannon and the wedding feast. Rhiannon told Pwyll how foolish he had been, but that he could not go back on his word, and that he must give her to Gwawl, but that the feast was not his to give. She told Gwawl to return in a year's time, and that a new feast would then be laid out for her marriage to him then. Gwawl agreed to this, and Rhiannon then gave Pwych a magical bag and instructed him to come to the feast the following year, disguised as a beggar, and to ask a boon of Gwawl, which would be simply that he be allowed to fill his bag with food. And so the following year the wedding feast was laid out for Rhiannon and Gwawl, and sure enough Pwych came along disguised as a beggar and asked for a boon. Gwawl, being less rash than Pwych had been, said that he would grant the boon if it is a reasonable request. When Pwych asked to fill his bag with food, Gwawl, seeing that the bag was small, granted his request. But however much food Pwych put in the bag, it was never full, and eventually he had taken half the feast. In exasperation, Gwawl asked if the bag would never be full, at which Pwych informed him that it would only be full if a nobleman, endowed with land, territory and power, stands in the bag and treads down the food with both feet and says, "Enough has been put in here." So Gwawl then stood in the bag, and Pwych quickly pulled the bag up over him and tied it shut. He and his men then set upon him and began beating the bag until Gwawl cried for mercy. Rhiannon then set the terms for Gwawl's release, stating that he must relinquish his claim on her and vow that he would not seek redress. Gwawl agreed and was released, and Pwych and Rhiannon married. 2 days later, Pwych and Rhiannon headed back to Dyfed, to Pwych's kingdom, taking residence at the court in Arbeth. Rhiannon was loved by all for her kindness and generosity, and the two lived happily together for 3 years. However, because they had still not produced an heir, Pwych's advisers began to mutter about Rhiannon and advised Pwych that he should put her aside and take another wife. Pwych refused to do so and told his advisers to wait another year. Before another year had passed, Rhiannon gave birth to a son. On the night of his birth, 6 nurses were instructed to watch over him whilst Rhiannon slept, allowing her to rest peacefully. But the nurses all fell asleep. And upon awakening in the morning, they were horrified to find that the child had disappeared, whilst Rhiannon remained sleeping. The nurses were scared that they would be blamed for the baby's disappearance, and so they hatched a plot to put the blame on Rhiannon. A greyhound bitch had just whelped and had a litter of puppies, so they took some of the puppies, killed them, and spread the blood and bones around the chamber, smearing blood on Rhiannon's face and hands. When Rhiannon awoke and asked for her child, they told her that she had done a terrible thing, and that she had been wild and raving and too strong in her madness for them to stop her from killing and eating her own baby. Rhiannon remained calm and asked them to tell the truth, and told them that they would not be punished. But the nurses persisted with their story. Pwych's advisers told him to divorce Rhiannon for having committed such a terrible outrage, but Pwych refused, but agreed to punish her instead. Her punishment was to stay at the court of Arbeth and to sit by the mounting block outside the gate and to tell the story of what she had done to any who passed, and to offer to carry any visitors on her back, as if she were a horse. However, few people took her up on this. Meanwhile, in Gwent, Rhiannon was lord, and he had a fine mare which would give birth to a foal every May Eve. However, the foal would disappear as soon as it was born, and no one knew how or where it had gone. So this year, Rhiannon said to his wife that he would keep watch. He had the mare brought indoors and armed himself for the night's vigil. As it began to get dark, the mare gave birth to a perfect foal which stood to its feet immediately. As Rhiannon stood up to examine the foal, there was a loud noise, followed by an enormous claw coming through the window and grabbing the foal by its mane. Rhiannon drew his sword and cut off the arm at the elbow. He heard a scream and he ran out to chase the creature, but he could not see it in the dark. When he returned, he found not only the foal, but next to it a small boy with golden hair. Rhiannon took the boy to his wife, as the couple did not have any children of their own, so they decided to bring him up as their own. The boy was dressed in a mantle of brocaded silk, and Rhiannon's wife realised that he must be the son of noble people. They named the boy Gyrru Wacht Erin, blooming golden hair. Gyrru grew quickly, and by the time he was 2 years old, he was as sturdy as a 6-year-old. After his 4th year, Gyrru was given the foal, which was born on the night he appeared. News of Rhiannon and her punishment came to Rhiannon, and he realised that Gyrru strongly resembled Pwych, and realised that he must be Pwych's son, and he and his wife agreed to return the boy to Pwych and Rhiannon. As they approached Arbeth, they saw Rhiannon at the mounting block, and she offered to carry them on her back, which they refused. They made for the court and were welcomed by Pwych. That evening, when Rhiannon had returned from her daily punishment, they sat to feast, with Rhiannon sitting between Pwych and Rhiannon. Rhiannon told the whole story about the boy and the mare, and told Rhiannon that this was her son. Rhiannon exclaimed that it was a relief from her anxiety, and thus Gyrru was renamed Pryderi, meaning anxiety. We can see from this story that Rhiannon is connected with horses throughout. She first appears riding on a magical white horse, which, despite its slow, steady pace, no one can catch until they address her in the proper manner. She will not be chased after or run down. One simply has to ask her to stop and take notice of us, for she has been waiting all along for us to address her properly. She appears as a symbol of self-sovereignty on her white horse, and knowing her own mind. In the medieval period, when these stories were written down, a time when women had little agency or say in their own destiny, she still appears as a strong and powerful woman who takes charge of her own destiny. She will not be married against her will, but will marry a man of her own choosing. Rhiannon's second connection with horses is her punishment, when she's made to act as a horse, waiting by the mounting block and offering to carry visitors on her back. Rhiannon takes this fate without complaint. She bears hardship nobly, with quiet strength, knowing that all will work out well for her, and she never loses her own sense of self and inner sovereignty. Her third connection with horses was when her son makes his reappearance one Beltane next to the foal, which Rhiannon had saved from the clawed arm which came through the window. We're never told what the creature is that stole the child, but we know that it stole a foal from Rhiannon's mare every year on May Day, a time when the veil is thin between the worlds. The fact that it also stole Rhiannon's child suggests a link between the child and the foals, and between Rhiannon and the mare. Rhiannon is considered by many modern pagans to be the Welsh form of Epona, the Gaulish horse goddess. The on or non ending in Welsh names suggests divine origin, and it is likely that the characters within the Welsh myths who have names with these endings were originally divine or otherworldly beings of some sort, though it could be argued that they were simply theonyms. When Rhiannon's name is back-derived into Proto-Celtic language, we get the name Rigantona, which means Great Queen. There are no ancient inscriptions of this name, which is not surprising, as the Iron Age Celts were an illiterate culture. But Great Queen was a title of a number of deities, including the Irish Morrigan and the Gaulish Epona. Rhiannon appears as a strong female figure in the stories, representing self-sovereignty and the sovereignty of the land. As an otherworldly being who emerges out of nowhere and is described in a similar manner to the wife of Arawn, the lord of Anuvan, some psychopompic qualities are also suggested. Rhiannon's influence is also felt in the second branch of the Mabinogi, although she does not appear directly. This is the story of Bran and Branwen and the children of Lear. Pryderi, Rhiannon's son, is one of the men who accompanied Bran to Ireland to fight against the Irish due to their treatment of Bran's sister Branwen. Manawydan, another son of Lear, was also among them. The consequences of the war were devastating, and both armies were destroyed. Bran himself was fatally injured, and Branwen died of a broken heart at the devastation. Only 7 men returned alive from Ireland, Pryderi, son of Rhiannon and Pwyll, among them. When they arrived at Harlech carrying Bran's head, which he had ordered them to cut off and carry with them, the Adair Rhiannon, the birds of Rhiannon, began to sing. The singing of the birds was healing, allowing them to recover from all the pain, sorrow and loss which they had experienced. As we've seen, birds and horses were often connected in Iron Age art, and Rhiannon is associated with both mystical horses and magical birds. The men remain at Harlech for 7 years. They then travel on to Gwales, where they are trapped in a pleasant otherworldly land for 80 years, never ageing during that time, and Bran's head not decaying, before travelling to London to bury Bran's head under the Tower of London. The birds of Rhiannon also appear in the story of Culhwch and Olwen, where they are said to wake the dead and lull the living to sleep. In the third branch, the story of Manawydan, son of Llŷr, Pryderi invites Manawydan to come back to Dyfed with him. Although Manawydan had a right to Bran's throne, it had been usurped by Caswallon in his absence, and Manawydan chose not to challenge him so as not to start another war. Pryderi introduced Manawydan to Rhiannon, who by this time was widowed. We are not told how Pwyll died, but given that Pryderi and Manawydan had been away for over 87 years, he likely had died of natural causes. Rhiannon, however, being an otherworldly woman, has not aged and is still a fine-looking woman. She and Manawydan enjoy each other's company and marry. This can be seen as another mythological marriage of a land goddess with a sea god, similar to that of Poseidon and Demeter in Greek mythology. Manawydan is a son of Llŷr, a god of the sea, and part of the family of divine beings connected with the sea, whereas Rhiannon is of the land and Anuvan. Following the marriage of Rhiannon to Manawydan, the couple, along with Pryderi and his wife, Cigfa, climbed up to the top of Mount Arbeth, the hill from which Pwyll had first spotted Rhiannon. Once there, a mist descended upon them, and everything in the kingdom disappeared. The 4 then travelled around the land, stopping at various places, where Manawydan and Pryderi took up various crafts, and did well until threatened by the other craftsmen, who were worried that they were taking their trade. Eventually they went back to Arbeth, with still no sign of their kingdom. They spent a year living there contentedly and hunting for their food, but one day when out hunting, Manawydan and Pryderi, they saw a pure white wild boar, which they chased, with their dogs following it into a towering fort which they had not seen before. They waited for the dogs to return, but when they didn't return, Pryderi went inside the fort to look for them. In the centre of the fort was a well, and hanging over the well was a fine golden bowl with chains reaching up to the sky. Pryderi went to the bowl and grabbed it, but when he touched it, his hands stuck fast to it, and his feet stuck to the slab he was standing on, and he lost the power of speech. Manawydan waited for him until evening, but when Pryderi did not return, Manawydan went back to Rhiannon, who scolded him for being a poor friend to Pryderi. She then went out looking for Pryderi herself. She found the fort and entered, and seeing Pryderi, she went up to him and grabbed the bowl herself, but she too stuck to the bowl. Then there was a loud noise, and they both disappeared. Manawydan and Cigfa, now having lost their dogs and unable to hunt, went to England, where Manawydan took up shoemaking until the other shoemakers threatened to kill him due to his work being superior to theirs. They then decided to return to Dyfed, where they sowed fields of wheat. When the corn was ripe, Manawydan looked at the fields and said he would reap the first field the next day. However, when he went to reap the field in the morning, all that was left were bare stalks. The next day he intended to reap his second field, but again found it bare. So Manawydan decided to keep watch on the third field. During the night, he saw a huge number of mice invading the field. Enraged, he charged in and went after one mouse, which was fatter than the others and unable to run as fast as the others. Manawydan then planned to hang the mouse for its crimes. As he was preparing the gallows, he was approached first by a cleric, then by a priest, and lastly by a bishop, all asking him not to hang the mouse and offering him money to spare it, telling him that it was beneath his station to act in such a way as to hang such a worthless creature. Manawydan refused all their offers and proceeded with building the gallows. Finally, the bishop asked Manawydan to name his price to release the mouse. Manawydan replied, "The release of Rhiannon and Pryderi." The bishop agreed to this, and Manawydan added that he also wanted the enchantment to be lifted from Dyfed and to know who the mouse was. The bishop replied that it was his pregnant wife, and that he was Llwyd, son of Cilcoed, and that it was he who had placed the enchantment over Dyfed to avenge Gwawl, son of Clyd, the man whom Rhiannon had originally been betrothed to before marrying Pwyll. Manawydan asked for Pryderi and Rhiannon to be returned before he would release the mouse, and asked for assurance that no vengeance would ever be taken on him, or on Pryderi or Rhiannon. Pryderi and Rhiannon were returned. Manawydan asked about the manner of Rhiannon and Pryderi's imprisonment. The man informed that Rhiannon had had the collars of the asses around her neck, and that was her imprisonment, whilst Pryderi had the gate hammers around his neck. Rhiannon's connection with horses and donkeys is thus seen again here in the manner of her imprisonment. Epona was also associated with both donkeys and horses. The Welsh stories were written during Christian times, though refer to an earlier time around the time of the Roman invasion. As such, they are referring back to a pagan time. But any pagan deities who may appear have been transformed into heroes and heroines, albeit ones with supernatural powers. The stories, however, have a heavy veneer of Christianity over them. We cannot say for sure whether there was ever a pagan Celtic goddess called Rhiannon, and given the way language changes, if there was, her name would likely have been in a different form to the modern Welsh. There are no inscriptions of a goddess with that name, no mention by Roman writers. Yet Rhiannon encompasses and embodies a rich corpus of tradition with otherworldly connections and psychopompic qualities. Her connection to horses and magical birds are suggestive of other European goddesses with similar links. Her connection with Anuvan, the not world, or the very deep, suggests that she is from a divine realm. There are also suggestions within the first branch of Rhiannon being a threefold figure, with Arawn's wife and the wife of Terinon, neither of whom are named in the story, both being described as dressed in the same manner as Rhiannon. Terinon's name, also ending in the non-syllable, indicating divine origins, means great king when back derived into Proto-Celtic, and he may originally have been partnered with Rigantona Rhiannon. Statues of three female figures, known as the mothers or matronae, often appear in Celtic art, and the Gaulish Epona is often considered to be a specialised form of matrona, a divine mother figure. The Welsh form of matrona is Modron, who also appears in Welsh myth with her son Mabon, just as Matrona has a son, Maponus, the divine son. Mabon too has a son who is kidnapped and taken to another realm. In the story of Culhwch and Olwen, he has to be rescued from a tower by Arthur and his men. The story of Rhiannon and Pryderi mirrors that of Modron and Mabon, and it could be argued that they are one and the same. Pryderi is the Mabon, the divine son whose story the four branches of the Mabinogi tell, and Rhiannon is his divine mother. The four branches make up the Mabinogi, whereas the book known as the Mabinogion contains additional stories which introduce characters who are not in the four branches, but who often have related tales. Although we cannot prove that Rhiannon was a goddess in the distant past, she certainly embodies characteristics of the divine. As Christopher Hughes of the Anglesey Druid Order says, Perhaps it doesn't matter whether or not she was a goddess in the past. She is a goddess now because we need her to be. She is the divine mare, sovereign queen and great mother. She teaches us patience, self-sovereignty, acceptance of our burdens, and acts as a guide and psychopomp on our journeys. I'm now going to recite a prayer to Rhiannon, which I have written. The first bit is in Welsh and then it'll be in English. To Rhiannon. Rhiannon, bendigedig, brenhines ein gwlad. Diwch atomni, gyda'ch adar alchan melys. Deffrwch ein calonau a glywyn henidiau. Mwyn i ni ddagonfod, ein gwir, rhoi braw a dod, yn soffrein ei ed. Ohonom ein hunain. Blessed Rhiannon, Queen of our land, come to us now with your sweet singing birds. Awaken our hearts and brighten our souls, that we may discover our true paths and become sovereigns of ourselves. Blessed Rhiannon, Sovereign Queen, gracious Lady, wise and serene, who mounted on a fine white horse, with purposeful and constant course, though slow and steady as your pace, the swiftest pursuers cannot outrace. As gracefully you onward ride, until letting go of arrogance and pride, they give up the fruitless chase and address you with the proper grace. O Rigantona, hail great Queen, Rhia Annwn, Queen of worlds unseen, teach us patience and courtesy, wisdom and self-sovereignty. Give us the courage to pursue our arts, and may your soul-healing birds bring joy to our hearts. If you have enjoyed this video and found it interesting, please do like the video and subscribe to my channel. Also, do check out my book, Mystic Mares and the Mary Lloyd. Thank you for watching.